Good afternoon, everyone. For the 170 or so of you who came on early, you got to see a little behind the scenes right before the event goes live. I am Luke Tannen. I'm the Executive Director of Chicago Innovation, and I want to welcome all of you today to the Future of Food. Now, we had over 600 people, in fact, just about 700 people RSVP for the event today. So once again, proving that people in Chicago like to eat. And all of us here have become, really in one way or another, food innovators over the past year. You know, our personal interests, habits, desires around food really are shaping the future of food in real time, from how we grocery shop or interact with food delivery to the tools and resources that we use to determine what is healthy, high quality, and safe. You know, many of us have even innovated in the kitchen since COVID started. You know, personally, I learned I do not have the patience nor the talent to properly grow a sourdough starter. And trust me, I tried for about 3 weeks, but I did, however, learn that I can sear, baste, and finish a steak that I think would be worthy of being served at Boca. So Kevin Boehm, just, let me know if you need some help in the kitchen. Now, before we meet today's speakers, people who are engineering how we'll experience food in the future, I want to thank our year-round Chicago Innovation sponsors. Now, these include our diamond sponsors, SMS Assist, Wintrust, Walgreens, and the presenting sponsor of today's event, Accenture. Gold sponsors Comcast Business and Exelon. Silver sponsor Vetter Price. Bronze sponsors Energy BBGO, Crown Castle, LK, Thompson Coburn, Granger, Ramsey Innovations Groupon, and Aero Digital Labs. And our media partners Intersection, Clear Channel Outdoor, WBBM News Radio, NBC Chicago, and Crane's Chicago Business. Now, for those in the audience, if you have a question for the panel, please send it to us via the Zoom Q&A. We'll spend the last 15 minutes or so addressing your questions. And now I would like to hand it over to the co-founder of Chicago Innovation and president of Kuzmarski Innovation, Tom Kuzmarski.
Hey, thanks, Luke. Hey, we are so excited to have so many of you with us today at this great event. I know it's because of the amazing star panelists and moderator that we have for this event. So it's no surprise, actually, given who we've been able to assemble. You know, Chicago is known throughout the country for being one of the best food towns in America. And when you match that with our innovative spirit, it's no surprise that the future of food is a relevant and timely topic for all of us. You know, when you look at some of the past Chicago Innovation Award winners, you know, companies like Farm Logics and Farmer's Fridge and Simple Mills, and you look at large companies, food companies like McDonald's and Kraft Heinz and Conagra, you really can see the breadth of innovation that occurs here in the food industry. And Chicago continues to lead the way. And today we're fortunate enough to be joining the Executives Club and our very good friend and close ally in our pursuit of celebrating and connecting and educating innovators throughout Chicago is the CEO and president of the Executives Club, our good friend, Margaret Mueller. Margaret?
Thank you so much, Tom. We love being partners with you. This is our favorite event to partner on. We've been doing it for a number of years now. As the nexus of the Chicagoland business community, we believe so strongly in these partnerships, and this is one of the best ones we have. We also have a food and beverage forum and a lot of members who are active in that forum, and so it makes so much sense for the connectivity. So I want to welcome all of the Executives Club of Chicago members who are here with us today. We're really excited, and Luke, let's get going.
Great, thank you, Margaret. As always, we're so proud to be partnering with you and the Executives Club on this event. Now, I'd like to hand it off to the moderator for the Future of Food, Karen Volker. Karen is Accenture's Midwest Innovation Lead and Global Retail Innovation Lead. She's 20 years of experience working in the retail and CPG industries and leads Accenture's brand new food-focused innovation lab, which is called The Extract. So everybody, please welcome Karen Volker.
Hi, everyone. I am so excited to be here today to talk to you about the future of food. And I am very humbled about the panel, the esteemed panel that we have here. So let's get into and meet our panelists. We have Kevin Boehm, who is the co-founder and co-CEO of the Boca Restaurant Group. He is a James Beard award-winning restaurateur who has opened 27 restaurants in the last 30 years. You know, he has no spare time. And then we have Matt Matros, who is the founder of Protein Bar and Limitless. He is a serial entrepreneur, who scaled protein bar restaurant chain nationally and recently sold Limitless to Keurig Dr. Pepper in 2020. We have Linda Mahlers, the president and CEO of PharmLogix. This food industry logistics company was ranked the #5 fastest growing supply chain company in the US on the 2020 Incorporated 5,000 list. That's just amazing. PharmLogix was also a 2013 Chicago Innovation Award winner. And last but not least, we have Alpana Singh, who is the host of Check Please. She's an Emmy award-winning TV personality, restaurateur, and the youngest woman to ever receive the distinction of the Master Sommelier. So to kick us off and to get going, we actually have a poll question for you guys, the audience. So Paul, do you want to go ahead and load up our first poll? All right. So if one of the following food drinks was wiped off the planet forever, what would be the most devastating for you? Chocolate, coffee, wine, steak, or pizza? I don't know, that's a really hard choice. I think that's like my daily diet. Oh, we have a lot of people that run on caffeine. Next up, chocolate and wine. Great. All right. So we are talking about the future of food. So for the first question for the panelists, I want you to all close your eyes, and even the audience, let's all close our eyes for a second. We want you to think, you know, about 20 years from now, it's 2040. What is a food-related service or technology that you hope to have access to by that point, that you don't have access to now? So let's start with Alpana. Have you answer this one first?
Yeah, actually, the first thing that comes to mind is driverless cars, you know, because I think that delivery has become so important in the last few years, only, you know, to be lit on fire during the last 9 months. And one of the, you know, of course, it's cost prohibitive with the driverless technology. And so I think having that in play would be something that would be very much a game changer.
Oh, driverless cars. Think about the food that could just get transported around. I love it. All right, Linda, you're up next. What did you imagine in 2040? And I think you're on mute.
Sorry about that. One thing that we're working on is basically this concept that came out of the pandemic is being able to access food wherever we are. You know, where we work has changed, where we learn has changed. And so really being able to access food anywhere, anytime, all our favorites, but also to democratize the food system so that's available to all populations in all neighborhoods. That's my wish for 2040.
I love that. We asked a lot of the audience questions that they submitted ahead of time, and a lot were around sustainability. How do we feed the population? So definitely some food challenges to solve in the next couple of years. Yep. All right, next up, let's go to Kevin.
Well, I think the best restaurateurs are like CIA agents often. We try to learn as much about our guests before they walk in the door. And I think if we had personalized nutritional data on all of our guests before they came in the restaurant, I think a lot of people know the food that they like, but they don't necessarily know the food that likes them. So I recently wore a glucose monitor for 30 days, and I learned a lot about how that spiked my glucose and how I slept better or slept worse based on what I was eating. And if people, when they walked into a restaurant, if we kind of knew how they operated from a genetic standpoint, I think we could actually give even better restaurant experiences.
I love that. Personalized nutrition, personalized options, menus, amazing. And Matt, what do you have in 2040?
On behalf of the Keurig Dr. Pepper Corporation, thank you all for selecting coffee and having that be the #1 thing you usually. My answer is similar to what Kevin was saying, thinking about the nanotechnology of food. It's easy to make generalizations. Oh, this is good for me, or this is bad for me. And in certain populations, that is true. But I think soon we will have the ability to understand from a nanotechnology perspective how certain things are affecting us. And we've seen this a little bit with things like Everlywell or 23andMe and understanding our specific DNA. And I know a lot of what Kevin is working on with his Beyond facility in Chicago is working towards that. But just understanding how each and everything that we as humans put into our body affects our specific body.
That's right. I just recently did the Everlywell test. I haven't gotten my results yet, though. I'm super curious what's going to tell me about what I should be eating. All right, next question for the entire panel. This past year, in many ways, accelerated innovation, which was exciting for me to see so many things that we've been wanting to happen accelerate across different industries. In more extreme ways, it also changed directions of some entire industries. So when we look at the future of food, we have two questions. One is, what is one way that the industry has been redirected or completely changed? And then what is one way innovation has really been accelerated in the food industry? So maybe Linda, we'll start with you this one.
Sure. First of all, I'm seeing these messages from Robin and Mandy. First of all, Robin, I think I know your parents, but Mandy and Robin, you know, I think that really wait, hold on. The question is about what we see happening, right, within the past year. Is that what you just?
And how is that how has innovation been accelerated or redirected? Okay,
so this is huge for us because prior to the pandemic, I mean, just our business, we manage a database of $10 billion of institutional food spend, where we're able to see trends across higher ed, K-12, business dining, and healthcare. And so we recognize those trends, and we recognize and see the importance of Gen Z in using their voice and their choice in directing change. What has happened in the last year between the pandemic and the protests and the political landscape in our environment is now Gen Z's message, we're all sitting up straight and we are all listening. And what's so cool is it's become multi-generational. So where that boundary between millennials and Gen Z and baby boomers, that line has come down and we all care about the same thing. We're also seeing like the hospitality space and the institutional space come together to create solutions. We're seeing direct sales to the consumer. And so there is so much innovation and so much creativity that I think Gen Z was driving forward solely as a generation. And now we're seeing this democratization and this, and just access to better food and caring, and just this message from Mandy about the SNAP benefits at the farmer's market, all these things becoming real and possible, and everybody getting behind it, particularly the tech community. It's very exciting for us.
I love that. All right, Kevin, let's go to you.
Well, I think in 2008, when the market crashed, you know, some of the best chefs in the world pivoted to a lot more casual fare, and you know, restaurants like, you know, Momofuku and even in my case, Girl and the Goat, were kind of born out of those times. You know, these incredible chefs doing more casual food. So I think what's happened during the pandemic and what has been redirected is a lot of great chefs pivoted to delivery food and even more casual steps. So the consumers won in that regard because everybody was doing delivery food, even restaurants that you didn't have access to before, like Alinea. If you drove down Halstead at about 4 o'clock, it looked like, what is going on? Is there a rock concert going on? There's about 100 cars lined up so people could eat Alinea. And then I think what got accelerated was the chef relationship directly with consumers. And when you look at meal kits specifically, I think there were a lot of people, in our case, Stephanie was doing meal kits that people were getting in their home. And then we would have a link to Stephanie actually cooking the stuff that was in those meal kits so people could follow along with the video. And it became a much more personal experience than just going to a restaurant. People were learning how to cook, were learning that directly from a video with a chef. And so I think there's a whole new way to cook at home, a whole new way to get food at home. which I think is just okay in the short term, but I hope humanity puts them back inside of restaurants very soon, because that's where my real heart lies.
I think everyone's going to be tired of cooking. But I will say I did do the Alinea experience for my birthday. It was amazing just to have that more accessible than I think we had before for a lot of people. Matt, I can't make you go last twice in a row. How about you? What did you see happen?
But you can make me follow Kevin twice in a row, who he also stole my answer before. I was going to speak to production and distribution via your phone and other mediums has allowed you to connect with either the consumer or the viewer or the guest in a way that sort of existed, and maybe it only existed with the big brands like the Facebooks and the Instagrams and YouTubes of the world, but now it has really expanded. I know from a redirected within big consumer packaged goods, there's been a flight to familiar. So folks aren't really discovering new brands anymore, which is unfortunate for a lot of the emerging and startup brands. A lot of folks are going back to brands that there's a comfort around, whether it's literal comfort food brands like, you know, the Betty Crockers of the world, or McCormick Spices, or even bigger brands like Coca-Cola and Dr. Pepper. There's been this flight to familiar. But since Kevin stole my thunder on the other one, the other thing I'll say is there's been a real issue with food inequality that I think the pandemic has highlighted, which I'm hoping is, obviously food inequality is not a good thing, but I'm hoping the fact that the pandemic has brought to light the fact that many people across our country, let alone our world, are going hungry, yet farmers are dumping milk, or yet farmers are not able to sell corn. That is just sort of a heartbreaking thing to me, that I really hope that some folks can use this as an opportunity, as a way to solve.
Great. Alpana, what have you seen over the past year that really accelerated from innovation?
I'm glad that Matt prefaced me by saying that, yeah, food inequality. So when we talk about, you know, what's been happening, we really need to talk about a tale of two worlds, you know, and I think one thing that's been highlighted is that cooking is a luxury, you know, that you can go to the grocery store, buy nutritious food, you have the time to cook it, that you have a space to cook it in. And I think as time goes on, you know, our apartments are going to get smaller, you know, there's going to be, you know, more sort of, you know, co-living spaces, more people living in a space there as well, you know, and so if we're looking, and yet the people who need the meal kits the most because they're working two jobs or they're part of the gig economy, you know, I think we all saw, like, even with the school lunches, you know, when school was out, we learned that was a major, you know, that was a meal that the kids could count on at least once a day, and that without it, you know, kids would go hungry. And the Chicago public school systems, you know, made sure that they continued dropping off that meal service. And so, you know, with that being said, how do we make food affordable? How do we make it convenient? How do we make it nutritious? And, you know, how do we deliver these foods to the people that need it? And then on the flip side of that, you know, the ones who can't afford, you know, the higher end meal kits and what have you, you know, I feel that what restaurants have seen sort of this change in is how you view the restaurant. You know, I think restaurants have sort of crossed that barrier where it's not, you come to us, we come to you, and how you utilize us. You know, it's Friday night, you're tired, you don't want to cook, and you can pick up a meal package. You know, even Alinea, you know, as people mentioned before, you know, like bringing that celebration into your home that you wouldn't be able to do before. I think technology has definitely changed a lot of it. You know, as far as leveraging technology, making it seamless for the customer, the curbside pickup, I definitely don't think that is going to be going away at all. You know, people, whereas maybe even like instead of making, you know, appetizers or platters, they can just pick it up from a restaurant. You know, and restaurants also sort of like different restaurants for different purposes. You know, I will go to a protein bar because I'm working, I'm busy, I want something nutritious, you know, and quick and easy and delicious, and there you go. But it's my anniversary and I go to Boca for an immersive experience to get away from the world. And so different restaurants for different purposes, but I do really want to emphasize that, you know, we are definitely talking about a tale of two worlds, and there's a huge inequality. And the last statement I want to say is somebody said this to me one time. He was a food activist, and he said that obesity is the face of poverty in America. that it is often seen as, you know, the fact that the people who can afford to do so will have a longer lifespan, you know, will suffer, you know, from, you know, a lot of these ailments that are caused by food. And I think that's a real stain on our country, that when we talk about these obesity numbers, that they cross-section with the fact that it correlates to poverty. You know, and we need to completely overhaul the food system. I mean, yeah, exactly. Like, why were we throwing that milk out? You know, and so, so that's that. So,
in case anyone's wondering what Alpana is talking about with obesity yet poverty, it's really around the cost per calorie. So, crappy calories are cheaper. So, crappy calories make you more obese, and unfortunately, the lower income populations, therefore, those that are suffering from poverty are more likely to indulge or have to sustain themselves through lower quality calories.
You know, I also want to add an innovation that we've seen and over the last couple of years that is not technology related. We run a program for the state of Michigan. Their legislature, they actually passed legislation where they reimburse 10 cents a meal if a school district can prove it came from a local farm. So our technology manages the program and we take in all of the invoicing. But when you think about it, that's $8 a case that a school district gets back as a rebate. The state pays for it. And then we also measure what populations in Michigan that food gets to. And poverty is not just an urban problem, it's a rural problem. I mean, there are farmers also on public aid. There are people who have lost their jobs in factories as, you know, as our middle class has gotten smaller. I mean, there's all sorts of it. So just, I think more reimbursement programs like this are super important. One thing that we realized is even though it was a state initiative in Michigan, it can be funded privately. So as long as we have this big audience, any corporations interested in funding it here, yeah, hit me up.
I love these discussions because I think we've seen some change, but not enough. And we need to accelerate how we address a lot of this over the next few years as we look at the future of food. The next question I have is kind of around innovation centers. So I have built out and launched an innovation center at Accenture that we call the Extracts that looks at the entire food value chain, everything from how consumers are living and what does that mean to how are they going to buy their food and what food should they be consuming, all the way to how it's grown. But when you look at innovation centers, and we've talked a little bit about this, but I want to dig deeper into what do we see as the biggest problems that need to be solved when it comes to food. So Matt, I'm going to have you go first, then you can't go after anybody.
Thanks for putting me on the spot. The biggest problem that needs to be solved for food is that oftentimes marketing drives decisions. Well, not all times, marketing drives decisions, and in many instances, marketing will determine where certain subsidies and other things are placed within our system. So specifically speaking, corn and soybeans having a certain cost to produce, and you sort of incentivize farmers to grow those sort of things, which ultimately leads to sort of those crappier calories that I was talking about earlier. So I'm hopeful that we can change the paradigm around how food is marketed, because there are certain innovations that won't allow for healthy food to be served because consumers don't expect it. I think one example is food technologies that allow cooked meats to be shelf stable. We as Americans don't believe that to be true. So it would be great if there was some sort of a marketing component around showing that food can be safe in a shelf-stable way when it's packaged cooked protein, as an example. So in other words, marketing driving consumer expectation, which will then open it up to innovation.
Okay, thanks. Linda, let's go to you.
Sorry, can you ask me the question again?
No, that's fine. What do we see as the biggest problems that need to be solved when it comes to the future of food?
Well, I mean, I think it's that whole democratization and access, and where I think it's extremely hopeful. So when we started our company in 2012, we were marketing just to restaurants, and as Alpana said, it really was a privilege, right? I mean, so the farm to table movement started, and it always does. with chefs and their innovations and creativity. When we started, we became the Chicago Public Schools Farm to School program in 2012. We're now in 2013. We're now in year 8 of that program. We were able to see what can happen to economies and to health outcomes and to education around nutrition when that democratization happens, right? So, so when a single day of vegetables served at Chicago Public Schools, and it is an entire trailer truck, 20,000, I mean, it's a 20 to 30,000 pound purchase for one day of vegetables. And so I think that from a farmer's perspective, that is an economic opportunity for a small farmer to be able to do that. And I think that, so I think that the chefs drive the trends, and then to take those trends and push them out and create that democratization and access is amazing. I think that we see it in our schools now. We're starting to see it in workplaces. I think we want to be able to see it in neighborhoods too. So that's the hope. Yeah.
Great. Alpana, what would you add? What are some of the bigger problems that you want to add to this list?
I think nutrition should be taught in school. I think how to eat properly, nutrition, you know, sort of creating a meal plan that works for you, but ensuring that it has cultural sensitivity. And it would be a great way for people to learn about other cultures. You know, one of the greatest ways that we learn about each other is at the table, you know, and so having that sensitivity that, you know, looking at the different heritages in the classroom and teaching, you know, there should be like a class that you take, you know, like 45 minutes a day, like we do PE. We should be teaching nutrition, because you have to get them when they're kids. You know, it's hard to take an adult and like, okay, eat your peas now. But if it starts with the kids, they'll take it home, you know, with their parents. And there's, of course, an organization here in Chicago called the Pilot Light Foundation, where they're trying to do that. They're trying to bring chefs into schools to get kids jazzed and excited about eating. And I do think it's possible, because you look at how many kids love watching cooking shows, you know, so under the guise of entertainment and fun and like, okay, you get to see Guy Fieri, you know, they're learning how to eat properly and eat healthfully. And I do believe that we need to get the junk food out of the schools. I mean, as much as I love like chips and things like that, they have no place in schools, you know? And so I think that you can't have it both ways. And it's really unfortunate that we rely on some of these companies in exchange for textbooks and computers, and they're sponsored, you know, so I think a redirect of our funds, and, you know, because either way, we're going to pay it. Either we pay it on the fork, or we pay it as far as, you know, in Medicare, you know, but we're going to pay for it eventually. And I think it would be better just to have healthy citizens.
Great. All right, Kevin, we got a long list. What else do you want to add to it?
The trash that I put into my stomach in Springfield, Illinois, District 186 schools in the 1970s. Jesus, would never do that today. We waste a tremendous amount of food in this country and around the world. And with better analytics and technology, we can find much more efficient ways of improving yield, of predicting spoilage times, and matching supply with demand. Hunger continues to be a major problem in this world, and something that needs to be at the top of everyone's list of something to solve when we can.
One thing that I'd like to add that is, I hope gains some steam is Chef Jose Andres, who I know Kevin knows, Alpana probably knows as well. He's really pushing the Biden administration to think of adding a Secretary of Food to the cabinet. I know we have a Secretary of Agriculture, which is sort of like the catch-all for where all things food related would fall in, but it's really evolved beyond that. Agriculture, or the Secretary of Agriculture's purveyance is different. It's mostly around, obviously, the growing, but there's an entire other supply chain around it, whether it's the distribution, retailing, or production of the food. And I think what Chef Jose Andres is trying to do would be a remarkable first step.
Well, Matt, look how much one person, Jose Andres, has done by his own will. And yes, Jose should be the person that is the
I agree. Yeah.
The Secretary of Food. He's the natural guy.
Yeah. Great. Paul, I think now is a good time to bring up the second poll that we have for our audience members. If you want to bring that up, let's see. All right, the question for you guys is, when considering the food you eat, what is the most important quality to you? Does it taste good? Is it healthy for you? If it's sustainably sourced, reasonably priced, or something else? We'd love to hear that, what you think is the most important quality. All right. Ooh, we have a really close battle from people want it to taste good, but also make sure that it is healthy for them.
Tough to get those same things in the same bite sometimes.
But it does go back to education too, on how do you get a different palate and what is right for you, what makes you taste good. I think there's a lot of different things that go into that. All right, so I have some individual questions. We'll start with Kevin. Boca Restaurant Group has been a pioneer in restaurant design, with so much attention on delivering that unique and high quality customer experience, which you started with in your opening. But as the digital experience has become more integrated in everything that we do, what do you think is the right balance for restaurants to achieve being physical and digital?
Yeah, you know, that's a really great question. You know, I like anything in technology that allows us to give better hospitality within the space. You know, I remember walking into a restaurant years ago, and I walked in the front door, and I had one foot inside the door, and they were like, "Oh my, Mr. Bain, welcome. We're so glad you're here tonight." And we walked in, and there was a handwritten letter on the center of the table. And mind you, I had just made an open table reservation. I remember at the end of the night, I went up to the maitre d' and I go, "Hey, quick question." I go, "How did you know how to pronounce my name correctly? Everybody always butchers it." And she goes, "Well, I was kind of confused about it, so I called one of your restaurants before you got here and asked how to pronounce your last name." And it was this beautiful combination of them Googling their guests, but at the same time, doing this analog thing that she did by calling someone and asking and caring enough to know to pronounce my name correctly. And so I think that's what we're looking at all the time. I don't want to have a restaurant where you're not talking to a server at the table who can tell you about food in a compelling way and sell it to you and tell you everything about it. I don't want to have a restaurant that has a POS at a table instead of a human being. So I'm interested in things that allow us to give better hospitality. And so there's always going to be that balance for me. I still own a record player, just to put myself in perspective. So I like technology, but I like the analog world too. And I think we've all been so separated from each other these last several months that I think that people are going to come back to restaurant in 2022 a lot because they're missing humanity.
Yeah, and I've been looking at what is the role of a physical space. And I think it's morphed a lot over the past year. And what you're talking about, Kevin, can be, how do you bring those servers, the chefs, even to people's own kitchens? I think we've started to get there, but there's so many different ways that when you're ordering a takeout meal, how do I get access to talk to one of the servers to get that information in this world where it's kind of more of a hybrid of how people are eating? All right, so let's go to Linda. You can make a strong argument that nothing had to be innovated around more urgently and dramatically in this past year than the supply chain, and still continues to be that. Has the blueprint for our future of food supply chains changed for good, and how so?
Well, I think that it goes back to that Gen Z's voice. I think that for a long time we were dictated, well, outside of the restaurant experience. I keep in mind I work in the institutional space. In the institutional space, we were dictated by what our distributors were bringing us and what was on a catalog of products that were served at school or at work or in a hospital cafeteria, right? And so what's changed for good is there is this expectation for the same quality of food where we go to school, where we heal, where we learn, and that basically not only is the food sustainable or local, but also that it is healthy. And one thing that we have found is there's no real definition for any of these things. It's all in the eye of the beholder. So, so one thing that we're doing is making the availability of being able to shop by these things. What does sustainable mean to you? Does it mean fair trade? Does it mean protecting the environment? Is local your own state? Is it 50 miles from where you are? So being able to shop by these things that are important to you are things that we're starting to do. We're starting to help cafeterias transition to food halls that not only bring restaurants to the students or to the employees, but also support BIPOC, minority, women-owned businesses. And so basically also bring economic support at the same time. So we're seeing that a lot of trends that came out of the pandemic in getting creative and getting food to people is also creating an opportunity for creativity and choice and economic recovery in very creative ways. And that is not going to change. We see that just getting bigger, a bigger trend. Yeah.
There's so much more to do in the supply chain.
Yes, yes. I mean, what's really encouraging though is it's really funny. I'm speaking tomorrow on another panel, and I have this cartoon of this conference table of dogs, and there's one cat raising its hand, and the dogs are saying, "This better be good." And that's how I felt the first time I went to Cisco corporate. So, so I think like, these conversations, I think, have a lot more cats. The dog cat ratio is getting balanced. I think that the large players in our industry are realizing that they have to engage the smaller players. And so there is a lot of collaboration going on that's really exciting. Yeah.
Great to hear. All right, Matt, this one's for you. We've seen a lot of new categories pop up. So plant-based, keto, kombucha, hard seltzer, just to name a few. And they go from like these fringe small categories to all of a sudden huge. So you've been pretty savvy throughout your career in calculating these categories that are poised for popularity. What do you predict that's coming next? Everyone's dying to know.
Well, I'm never going to play God, but I can tell you, despite what my mom and wife think, I'm not going to play God. I will tell you that the formula in food and beverage is pretty simple. Here it is, guys. Like, it has to be delicious. Health aside, whatever is make you tall, allergen-free, but it has to be good. You have to want to put it in your mouth, first and foremost. Number two, is it only marginally more expensive than sort of your closest analog? It's arrogant of entrepreneurs to think that people will pay much, much, much more, or that even people have the ability to pay much, much, much more for whatever that innovation is. And then number three, does it fit in your life in some sort of way that's easy? So that sort of speaks to, where do I get it? How convenient is it? And can it even be distributed? So that's sort of the formula for food and beverage. And the last thing I would say is, typically it's always better to take an existing category that is massive and try to improve upon it in some sort of way that becomes quasi-niche, versus truly starting a niche category. Peter Rahal is a close friend of mine. He's from RX Bar. He took the bar category, but specifically the fruit and date based bar, and made it marginally better by adding protein powder to it. And obviously RX Bar was a huge success here in town. Vital Proteins, another huge success in town. Massive category of protein powder. Let's make it marginally better by using collagen. Simple Mills, another Chicago-based huge success. Massive category of baking. Let's make it marginally better by doing almond flour. And then Limitless with spacious caffeine and LaCroix. Let's take sparkling water, which is a massive $2.5 billion category, and then make it marginally better by adding caffeine. So that's sort of what I've seen with the formula so far. A lot of good Chicago success stories recently, by the way, that I just named.
Those are all great, and I think all products are in my house. I have FOMO, so I always have to try out the new things. I think everybody wants to know what's on your whiteboards behind you. What you working on?
I'm launching a new startup. So think how I built this, but with a click to buy component, or sort of like a modern day QVC. That's sort of my new startup. It's called Shopflix. So it'll hopefully be live this April, May-ish. It'll be here in Chicago, but broadcasted nationally. So just ways of how content is created in my mind. Really, really, really expensive content, highly produced, kind of expensive content, or content that is sort of outsourced and other people can produce.
All right, we have some questions. They want you to name your company again. They missed the name.
Oh, Shopflix, S-H-O-P Flix, like Netflix, F-L-I-X. We don't have a website. It's not on LinkedIn. I haven't told Dr. Pepper about it yet. So shopflixstudios.com is kind of like the initial total landing page. It's not there yet, but for any brands that want to be featured on Shopflix, it's basically a demonstration network. So we don't say what's best or worst. We just demonstrate a variety of products, whether it's blenders or knives or robot vacuum cleaners or baby strollers, and then let you, the viewer, choose the one that's right for you. Thanks for that plug. I didn't intend on that being able to happen. I'm glad that whiteboard was there.
You're welcome. All right, Alpana, this question's for you. So you're a champion for local restaurants, and you show Check Please, and your own journey as a restaurateur. So you've seen the need for restaurants to evolve to where they're not just serving great food, but making that very emotional appeal and attention with the crowd. So what do you see is kind of the next, and how do you continue to do that?
Yeah, I want to make one more mention about the plant-based. I think that the pandemic has taught us that things that we didn't think were going to be possible, all of a sudden become possible when we're forced to make the change. And I think that when it comes to plant-based foods, at some point, the planet will not be able to produce the amount of food that we need for 8 billion people. And so, we're going to be forced into it, whether we like it or not. I mean, just this last week, just with the snowstorms in Texas, beef went up $3 a pound, chicken breast is up 30 cents a chicken breast, and that's just from one snowstorm. Imagine a global catastrophe where we're not able to provide the food. So I think it's actually very encouraging that they're forward thinking, that they're coming up with these alternative food sources that we can at least, I don't want to get all Matrix where they're eating the gruel, it's got to be tasty, but definitely something along those lines. Okay, and so regarding how restaurants sort of adapt, we're obviously, communicating via this medium and what have you. Some of us are probably, multitasking on our phones, checking Instagram or Facebook. Don't worry, I don't take it personally. It's because these algorithms are designed in a way to be extremely addictive. And if you did check your Instagram 15 times over, I will forgive you because, you're basically it's these very powerful MIT brains, figuring how to do this. And so I think that we're, understanding no matter what business that you're in, that we are in the attention economy. Again, we're in a $1 trillion economy that's based on harvesting our attention. And, it's trying to basically figure out a message that's going to gain traction in a world of distraction. And, there's just so many books that have been written about this lately, Jenny Odell's How to Do Nothing, Adam Alter's Irresistible, the work that Cal Newport's doing, with digital minimalism, Indistractable from Nir Eyal, Surveillance Capital, and so I just think that understanding where your customers are not where you think they might be, because they're on these devices, because we're basically on this hamster wheel, right? And so it's, I remember reading this article about the gentleman, the CEO of Restoration Hardware, and they continue to put out that very expensive catalog. I look forward to my Restoration Hardware catalog, right? And it's true because it's a book. It comes to me, I sit down and I savor every single page. And it's so unique in a world of deleting emails, delete, 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 delete. And so, obviously, small restaurants, even big restaurants can't, send out mailers like that. And you don't want to clutter with more, clutter. But it's how, Seth Godin has this concept called permission marketing. So it's creating content that your consumers are going to want. So when they get it in their mailbox, they're like, oh my gosh, what did you send me? What information are you giving me that adds value to my life, that I can use, that is some benefit to me? So maybe, you know, for me, like, you know, when I send a newsletter, these are 5 wines that you need to try. Maybe it's a recipe, maybe it's some behind the scenes look, or maybe there's sort of emotional connection there. And so it's just kind of understanding, you know, sort of like the mindset and the psychology of what's happening to all of us and how distracted we are, and, you know, just sort of fighting for that attention share.
That's amazing. So I'm going to take now from the Q&A some of the audience questions and throw these out at you guys. So Katie has asked, what are things we can do as consumers and everyday citizens to help food systems in our communities and the U.S. become more equitable, sustainable, and democratized? So who wants to jump in on that one?
Well, the first one from a consumer perspective, I would say just patronize local restaurants, right? That's the first place to start, right? Those are literally down your street, and they're the folks within your community. Secondly, I would say ask questions about ingredients. Where are the ingredients coming from? And then thirdly, be curious and be open-minded to dig into legislation and things that your legislators are supporting. Fortunately, we live in Illinois, which is a high agriculture state. So a lot of our state reps are heavily involved in some of the legislation around agriculture. So start being curious and hearing about that, and just understand that every little thing that the government does will impact something in some way. Chinese tariffs, it's not just on your iPhone, it's on soybeans. So see how it all kind of relates back through legislation.
Just to double up on what Matt said, yes, listen, ask questions, and just know that you can make a tremendous amount of impact politically in a short amount of time. I was one of the founding members of the Independent Restaurant Coalition, which just joined 10 months ago. We literally wrote a piece of legislation and got it past the House of Representatives. The Restaurants Act is in the HEROES Act, which right now $25 billion is going to go to restaurants that need it. The first 14 days of that program going to restaurants that do less than $1.5 million in sales in marginalized communities. All of that came from just 15 people jumping on a phone call in March. So from an average citizen standpoint, they listen to the people who voted for them. So call your representative, call your senators, you know, Dick Durbin, Tammy Duckworth, they were people who really cared and took everybody's phone call and really listened, and it made something that happened.
That's great. All right, so I'm going to take a question that was submitted from someone as they've registered. So Steve had asked, with the minimum wage tip credit possibly ending and a fewer server interactions due to COVID, do we actually think that full service restaurants will end the practice of tipping? I don't know if Kevin or Alpana, you guys want to comment on this one.
I'm happy to jump in on that one. You know, we'll see what happens. If tip credit ends, the restaurant model is already fragile and fraught with peril. So there will have to be a pivot. I think it probably eventually will. But what I think will come out of that is there'll be less team service. If you look at cities like Seattle and Los Angeles and San Francisco that do not have tip credit, it's a lot of restaurants that have a server and have runners and do not have server assistants because it's hard to afford. So yes, I think people will pivot, but I think at the same time, restaurateurs will design restaurants that allow servers to give better service with less steps. You know, when we designed Girl on the Go in Los Angeles, I was already thinking about the fact that we would have less people in the front of the house, and we installed more POS machines and more drawers with silverware in them, so servers could give just as good a service and take less steps. But you might find things that you felt were casual before, like putting a bottle of water on the table and 4 glasses. So I think service might get slightly more casual, But I think ultimately we're heading to a world where tips are shared with the back of the house because kitchen staff needs to get paid more money. And the disparity between what the kitchen makes and the front of the house makes has been a problem for a long, long time. There'll still be some tipping, but servers will make more money. And I think a lot of times in the big city, we see servers who do make a lot of money at restaurants, but we have a blind spot to these small communities where servers are still working in small diners and not making money. And there are some bad actors that don't get them up to that minimum wage. So I think there's some sort of hybrid model that can both save restaurants from the fragility of its current model and at the same time help people who are being abused in the system.
Thanks. All right, we have quite a few questions around plant-based meats. And so maybe Alpana, you could start with this one. People are wondering, like, what are our thoughts on plant-based meats, the future of protein, things like that?
So, I mean, just go try the Impossible Burger. I mean, it is, I ordered it for the first time and I actually took it back and I said, I think you gave me the wrong burger. And they're like, no, and I'm like, and I'm looking at like, this is kind of freakish, you know? And so, I mean, we have the Beyond Burger at our restaurant in Terra and Vine. And so we serve it and people, you know, ask for it and what have you. But again, it's just taste. And I mean, I can't figure out, I mean, Impossible Burger is distinctly different from Beyond Burger, but I just still cannot figure out how they can make that Impossible Burger taste like it does. I mean, it's absolutely kind of amazing. But there's you know, there's like a bit of an arms race on, you know, developing this artificial meat. You know, there's I forget, there's some venture capitalist guy that's like dumped like millions of dollars into creating this like hamburger to try to figure out how to do it. But I think that, like I said, I think that whoever figures it out and is able to get it distributed properly, and then us getting on board as far as like a normalized process, I mean, I think it's just a matter of time. And then the same thing being done to chicken. But I also think there's going to be a consumer sentiment shift as well, to just gradually kind of weaning off the meat in our diet. Right. And so I think that, you know, people are just looking at legumes and vegetables and grains and like, I mean, just look at what's happened in the dairy industry. You know, like you go buy some milk and it's like rice milk, macadamia, oat. I mean, it's just like, oh my gosh, like the choices are endless. So I think that it's, you know, changing consumer habits as far as what they're eating. Meat will be, you know, like real meat will be more of like a luxury item. And then maybe those occasions where you do want to have something, you know, maybe you go into, like I said, that impossible territory, definitely in the fast food sector, because you can't tell the difference.
This is unfortunately where the marketing thing I was talking about earlier as it relates to the food industry exists, because fortunately, as it relates to the plant-based food movement, it's gained a lot of steam recently, because for the first time within the last maybe 10 or 15 years, we've realized the connection between cattle industry and our environment. So in terms of carbon emissions, we used to think the environment sucked because we drove lots of planes or drove lots of cars and flew lots of planes, when in reality, it's the cattle industry. So I think that's been the sort of a tailwind pushing it. But the other thing, unfortunately, is the cattle and beef industry still spends gobs of money trying to tell Americans that in order to be manly, you got to eat meat, or in order to party with friends or tailgate with friends, you need a hamburger. So that will be an interesting thing that happens. Fortunately, on the demand side, there is the consumer demand, at least for many of these plant-based options. I personally have been plant-based for about 7 or 8 months, mostly plant-based.
Okay, Linda, I have one last question for you. This is submitted from Kathy during the registration. She lives on the outskirts of a big city. And so she's looking at farm to table or hydroponics. And where do we see those going?
Oh, where do we see them going? Oh, I mean, I think that I think farm to table is here to stay, because farmers are here to stay, right? So, and we want to support them. And when we talk about, you know, support during the pandemic, visiting the farmers markets are also really, really important. So visit your farmers markets and volunteer at food banks. I mean, that's super important too, to get involved. Farm to table is here to stay. Farm to campus is here to stay. I think that all is here to stay. I think we're seeing a lot of activity in hydroponics. It's super exciting. And what's really cool about it isn't just the 365 access to it, but the jobs that it creates. So there's some really interesting hydroponic businesses that are emerging on the south side of Chicago. They have some municipal backing. They create job opportunities, career paths for folks in the community. And there's some really, really wonderful things going on. They're almost too much to talk about here. But you're seeing even like people like the Dutch consulate get involved. I mean, they're getting involved in hydroponics because obviously they grow floral so well. And so they're bringing their technology here to Chicago, actually, specifically to help move that movement along. So if anybody is if she's interested in more information of where these facilities are located or getting involved or volunteering there, just get in touch.
And I just want to add one point regarding, the farmers. I think there also needs to be better representation on getting the face of who the farmer is. And, we have done a very poor job of representing Black farmers, particularly in this country. And, if you go back in history and you study, who actually began farming, particularly here in the United States, it was, the enslaved population that had farms that were given to them where they could grow supplemental food that was obviously extremely important to their survival. And they continue that legacy. And obviously with the whole, issue with, taking back the 40 acres from them and what have you, but at least we do see some light at the end of the tunnel with the Biden administration has saying that they are going to make Black farmers a priority. But I think, like I said, when we see these Ocean Spray commercials, representation matters. I would love to see an Ocean Spray commercial showing a Black farmer. We need to have a better idea of who is actually growing our food.
That would be amazing. All right, so it is close to 4 o'clock. And we're approaching happy hour time. So my final question for all of you is, what is your favorite cocktail? So Linda, or maybe favorite beverage or drink of choice?
Oh, I'll pick cocktail. It's a penicillin. I like old-fashioned cocktails.
Yum. All right, Alpana, how about you?
Wine, right? No, I should say limitless. Actually, I have to be honest. I pick coffee over wine. I have no problem winding down. My problem is getting, going. So I would have to say, if I'm going to be perfectly honest, coffee is definitely my favorite. But I think the beverage that I've been relying on to get through this pandemic has been tea. I found this really just a newfound appreciation for tea. So I just got to throw that out there.
Oh, I love that one. All right, Kevin, what's your drink of choice?
Before I say that, Alpana, thanks for the shout out to farmers. My mom was one of 14 kids, grew up on a farm. My grandfather was a farmer his whole life, Roscommon, Michigan. So shout out to farmers.
You should have a woman there in that Ocean Spray commercial.
My mom, at age 6, was working the farm at 4:30 in the morning. I am Reposado Rocks, 2 limes.
It's a good one. And Matt, what's your drink of choice?
I quit drinking alcohol 4.5 years ago. I used to spend too many nights in California Cabernet at all of Kevin's restaurants. So now, of course, it's sparkling water with caffeine in it, courtesy of Limitless and the Curve Dr. Pepper Corporation. Available nationwide at Walmart or here locally at Plum and Jewel.
Oh, I love it. I would also say water. I mean, just drinking more, drink more and more water. And then I'm a bubbles girl. So any type of champagne, Prosecco, Cava, I like that. So that is my drink of choice. Luke, I think I'm going to hand it back over to you to close out.
Great, thank you, Karen. And I'll answer it too. An old fashioned from the Swift and Sons beverage carts. That's my choice. So hey. Karen, Kevin, Alpana, Linda, and Matt, thank you for being such a stellar group of speakers to really bring today's future of food topic to life. We had nearly 700 people RSVP. We got over 60 questions before the event, another 25 I see today. This is a topic that everyone really cares about. So thank you all for just elevating this discussion, bringing so many different components to this to life today, and really helping to lead the way and write the future of food for the rest of us. So thank you for everything that you're doing. And I also want to lastly thank the big audience of people who tuned in today, and really for being the best community of people that we could ask for, our Chicago innovation community. This is our 20th anniversary, and we're excited to continue on this journey of celebrating and supporting innovators with all of you. And we have so much planned for this year. The next opportunity to reconvene, I'll give a quick plug just like Matt did, although it won't be as good as his, but it's March 11th, where we'll tackle the future of another issue that does also affect us all, and that's the future of health. So we hope to see all of you there. And until we do, stay safe, get vaccinated if you can, and we look forward to being with you soon. Thanks for being here today.